right, good evening, folks. It's, welcome to the June meeting of the Board of Electric Commissioners of Burlington Electric. Looking at you all out there, we meet every second Wednesday of the month at 5:30 here at 585 Pine Street. As always, the public is welcome to come in and join us and join the conversation and see what's going on. It is your electric utility, and we appreciate public involvement. So we'll start off with our first agenda item, which is the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the minutes of the May 10th, 2023 meeting. And other than, are there any substantive changes to the May 10th, 2023 minutes?
I do have a change, but I think it can be done informally.
Administratively, yeah.
Here it is. I'll give it to you.
Okay.
All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Make the motion to approve May 10th, 2023 meeting.
Motion made, do I have a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. What's the word? Discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll say nay. You guys have it. Minutes of the May 10th, 23 meeting pass. On to the minutes of the May 16th special meeting. Are there any substantive changes?
Nope.
None? Hearing none, I'll again entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes as given for the May 16 meeting.
Motion made. Over a second.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 All against say nay. Ayes have it. Minutes of May 16th pass. Item number 3 is the public forum. This is a time for members of the public to address the board, whether online or in person. It is your time to talk to us about concerns, faults, failures, anything, whatever. It's your time. Do we have anybody online in the public? None?
No.
We do have some folks here in the room, so this is your chance. This is your time if you want to come up and if you have any things to talk to the board about, we'd love to have you come on up and have a chat with us.
I think you have to unmute your speakers.
One of my more comfortable spots.
Yeah, there you go.
Camera and a microphone. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Ann Koss. I live at 120 Lyman Avenue. I've been a resident in that house for 43 years. So with the new changes in lighting that are being implemented by the Burlington Electric Company, I'd like to say I'm not too pleased, to say the least. There are 3 main things. I tried to be concise. One is aesthetics of these new poles that have gone in, completely out of character for a family neighborhood. My belief is, I think there could have been a much better job in picking something that would fit the neighborhood. The height of the poles, the size of the poles are, in my case, shining right in my bedroom windows, which is completely unacceptable. I called Bob. He was very helpful. He put some shields up. It improved it immensely, but it's still not great. The second thing I'd like to talk about is the illumination of these LED lights. I know they're efficient. They have some very good qualities, but the color and the projection of them on our street is, again, unacceptable. And the amount of poles on our street. We had corner intersection lights always, and we had one utility pole with the light in the center of the street. Seemed to do a beautiful job for the last 43 years. No problems, no concerns. So now with that, they've added 2 more on our street, which now gives us light continuously from one end of the block, between Wells and Richardson, I'm speaking, continuous lighting all the way down between those 2 streets. And and that gives us daylight hours, 24 hours a day. I have no respite from any light source, other, from the sun to the lamppost out in front of my house at all. So that's a concern for me. It's not only outside of my house that's now affected, it's invaded inside my house. The only way I can block that is to put up blackout curtains, blackout shades. Therefore, I can't open my windows. It's summertime. I don't have air conditioning. So the list just goes on and on and on. And in connection with the illumination of these lights, I also feel, this is a personal thing of mine, light pollution. We are worried about polluting the lake. We are very invested in recycling, in composting, taking care of what's around us. We're not taking care of the sky. I used to be able to look out my windows and see the full moon come by, look at the planets, the stars. I'm not an astrologer. It's just one of the benefits of living in Burlington, Vermont. That is going to now change, not for the better. When people come to Burlington, they want to see the quintessential, scenery, blah, blah. We're losing that. We're losing it greatly. And I really don't think that more lights, brighter lights, and make for a better community. We're not any safer. I don't feel we're any safer. I didn't feel unsafe before, but I don't feel any safer now. In fact, I think it's a detriment to what we have now to live with. I'd like to know if there's anything that can be done by this board or whoever's in charge of that, what we can do to rectify the situation. I know you're listening, I know you're hearing me, but I guess I'd like some answers of what changes could be made to improve the situation, not only for where I am now, but for future installations all across the city. I've been walking around the city, I've been looking at light poles, I've been taking pictures. I guess I'm a little perplexed about why we're putting so many more poles in, where I don't think they're necessary. On the corner of Richardson and Lyman, there's not one pole lighting the intersection, but 2 poles lighting the intersection, where 1 pole was completely sufficient. Same thing with a lot of other corners that I've noticed. I did go down Lakeside development, and I know that's an older development, and I walked around there, and I was kind of surprised. I saw 1 light pole at each corner, like Conger and whatever the street names are there, and 1 light pole in the middle of the block and another on the corner. Seems to be sufficient there. I don't know why we have to put 3 more on other places. I do have before and after pictures of what my street looked like before you put the lights in and what it looked like now, if you want to see those. Anything else? Yeah, I guess I just want to know where the formula is that came up that we need 7 streetlights between Richardson and Shelburne Road, and if we could reduce that for those reasons, because too much light is light. I know they have nice light bulbs, they come down, but they affect everything. They reflect off of surfaces, it does bounce back, it's disruptive. If they weren't lit up because of the need, that's not what I want to say. Light has an effect for good and for bad. And I understand the good, I see the need for it, but with that comes a lot of bad. And I'd like to eliminate as much bad as possible. If you could help us with that, it would be greatly appreciated.
You want to go? Well, I kind of just I'm Tate Agnew. I live 6 Lyman Avenue. Ms. Koss was a substitute a while ago, but I guess kind of to go off what she was saying, with the corners being a big negative, we live on the corner, and my bedroom is on Wells, we live on Lyman, but my bedroom, the light is on Wells. And we have one by those apartments that was recently put in. And then there's one on the farther side.
The further side.
And now we have that one in our front yard. So we have 3 lights within like an 100-foot radius, which just seems like a little bit of overkill to me. And 2 of them have put in within the past 5 years.
Well, 2 years ago. Yeah. And yeah, so I appreciate Scott came out last night. We were sitting on the front porch kibitzing, and I'm like, hey, can we help you? So he took the time. I appreciate him taking the time to see the light that we're dealing with. Part of my surprise was we knew the lights were coming because of the, but it was the whole neighborhood, and we're the only ones who showed up in the rain. Was under the impression we would get what we thought was more palatable, smaller poles that were put in on Scarf, because there was an overkill on Scarf. So somehow the neighborhood got the message that that's what we would settle for, and that we would deal with lighting, and 3 of those poles we would deal with. But then the big industrial poles came, and they're bright. And so I have 3 windows in my bedroom. I have a light outside of every bedroom, and Tate's got one, and we have 1 bathroom, and the clawfoot tub has one. So as far as ventilation and light, we got hit because we're the corner lot. The shade has helped. Somebody put did Bob have the shades?
Yeah, the shields.
The shield on the front, the new light. It would be great if they could shield the other ones, but the question is, there's a lot in a short span. I walked the paces when Scott was there. It's 30 paces from my corner to, I'm the first corner on the lot. Everybody else, if you look at the position of the poles, it's 3 houses up. So I just got a double whammy from all sides. I got a little house. Bethany's been on my front porch before the light came. And we spend our whole summer, fall, spring, summer, fall. It's our front porch. There's a bed out there that the kids sleep on. And it's a big, ugly industrial light. When I thought, okay, I'll settle for a smaller, more vintage looking light that would. So it's just hard. I don't know what the solution is. It's here.
I did walk around and I was taking pictures of the light poles that I think Burlington installed. So the ones that are noticeable that I kind of like, that could be an example, when you go down Flynn Avenue, enter into Oak Ledge Park, and there's the gazebo, with I'll call it a bathhouse, the shelter right there, not the further one down past the tennis court. They installed a new light, and it's fairly nice. It's, a beautiful, thin black candle, and has a round disc and sheds light down on it. So it's made for underground lighting, and it sits there very nicely, and I'm sure it was picked because aesthetically it goes with the lake. It doesn't intrude on the beautiful water that we look at, yet I went down when it was lit up, and it was sufficient lighting that people could see, people look safe. So that was one option. The other option, when I was coming back up, I noticed into City Market, they have some nice light poles, a little modern looking, and as you go in, they're built up on a cement pole, only because I think of its heights of trucks coming in and out. Again, that would be very acceptable in a neighborhood, a little modern looking. The other place I looked, I went into South Meadow, and that's been established. I don't think they've changed the lights in there for a long time, but again, they have square bases, probably 15 to 20 feet tall, and a little light coming out. Again, one light at the intersection, and maybe one in the middle of the block. And that's it. And if that's sufficient in those areas, wouldn't that be prudent to put it in all areas? And just as a side note, to make it a little levity, you put out the beautiful little calendars that the children put, draw their pictures for Burlington Electric, and they've done it since Tate was in school. And I looked at the particular one this year, you might want to look at it. And everything the children say, how to conserve energy, you do a great job educating the children, turn off the lights. Every kid, turn off the lights. They have a light switch, they tell you about, go outside and play, put your clothes on the line, whatever. But every one of them says, turn off the lights. And we seem to be turning more on. And in particular, if you look at the one this year, towards the end, someone did a beautiful, I think it was a little girl, did a beautiful picture of how to save energy. And right down in the corner, she's got some lights there, street lights. And I said, those street lights don't look like the ones that I have on my street. So when children think of street lights, they don't think of these big industrial ones. They think of something quaint and appropriate that they want to see or are used to. If you look at the calendar that Burlington Electric produces and wants people to read, what you advertise is what we should be seeing in our streets.
And I've got a question actually from one of our neighbors who couldn't come here, emailed. You just want us to keep talking? We've talked enough. So John Davis lives diagonally across the street from me. And he said, I cannot make the time. I have a friend who has a light meter. At the meeting, could you ask if there is a design standard foot candle level that the lights are supposed to create that we can measure against? So as far as the lights aren't uniform, at least on my corner. I've got one, I've got here, and I've got there. And the intersection because it even spills back to your house, 2 houses back. So I know that Gary Kauser is a neighbor of ours, and he's been here. He's like, where were you guys last year? I said, doing COVID, doing my mother dying. There was a lot going on. So he said that standards have changed and that you were able to lower the lights on Richardson. And I don't know if there's shields, but the lights on Wells are horrible. I was going to use another word, but as far as their brightness. So that was the question John had as far as what are the standards and
Could it be measured?
Is it going to be measured and is it equitable when you look? I mean, people on Ferguson were upset. I know the guy that shares the same block that I do, Ron's house, his pole was removed because I was dry. He's like, oh, they took mine out. I'm like, so I've got a lot of overflow. What's the meter at my corner versus your corner? And
I'm going to stop you right
Okay,
there.
yep.
Because you've actually just perfectly
segued into your
teed up.
explanation.
Exactly. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love to give the 2 experts here
Should we? We'll
the
bail.
opportunity to address some of your questions because you actually just teed it up for them perfectly. So I invite both of you guys. Yeah.
Right. My name is Munir Kasti, and I'm the manager of engineering and utility services. And with me,
Paul Nato, Director of Engineering.
yes. So let me start by going over the history of the street lighting in the city. We could be here for
You asked for this.
Yeah. we could be here. We could be here for the next week, but I'll try to summarize it.
Yeah, the Reader's Digest for
In 2000, I'm gonna start in 2014, the Electric Commission formed a committee to come up with a street lighting standards policy, which included 2 residents. My recollection, Bob was on that committee. We looked at, what we need to follow when designing the street lighting in the city. And the recommendation was to follow the IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society recommendation for lighting levels. And that's really to protect us as the resident as well as the city from the liability. So the committee looked at You know, the type of fixtures to be installed, the elevation of the light when installed, the standard lights. Um, we looked at different height for the poles. We looked at the typical light height, 30 foot above ground. We looked at 22, 25. We looked even at one of the example was, I believe, Leonard Street, when we did multiple design on that street.
Leonard Street.
Yep. And then the consensus was, you know, if you go lower in height, that's mean you're gonna have more falls, and people didn't like that idea. So we standardize on height, which is, you know, stay within 29 to 30 feet. That's where we put it on our wood pole, you know, for aerial system. And for the underground system, you know, people don't want to see the cable, the wire coming in on the pole if we keep with the wood pole. So we went with the fiberglass pole, which everything goes inside the pole, so that's not, you know, it's not on the pole, it's not, you know, on the outside of the pole. And then, you know, the color is the standard color for those pole was a gray. You know, the fixture silver to gray color, and the fixture is gray. So that's how we come up with the standard for the typical street lighting, you know, on the residential street. We had some decorative fixtures in the downtown area, and the policy really stated that, you know, for decorative street lighting district, BED will, with the advice from the planning and department, will select one decorative lighting fixture and pole that will be used in the gateway and on the commercial areas. Also, we understood that there is some, you know, different type of fixtures. I just want to call it, you know, decorative, but really they're not decorative, in some of the residential area at that time. And the policy said pre-existing non-standard decorative lighting will be maintained until the stock ran out, at which point they will be replaced by standard fixture and pole selected by BED unless a new district has been named. So on those streets where you see the town and county fixtures, you know, we had you know, some picture in this in our stock room, LEDs, as well as the pole. So the consensus was we'll replace them with the same. On other streets such as Lyman Avenue, they had wood poles on them. You know, so we replace, you know, we replace them with our standard pole and fixture, which is the fiberglass poles. So the policy calls for doing an engineering design to meet the requirement of the IS, which looks at the average light on the street as well as the sidewalk. Plus at, you know, the horizontal, you know, they changed it over time, and now we have to look at the horizontal and vertical, like 5 feet above ground, but not just on the road, but also on the sidewalk. And in the IS requirement, there's different light level for, you know, downtown, for residential area. And the latest requirement, they dropped the lighting level in residential to the barely minimum level, which that's what we're trying to meet. And usually the sidewalk is where you have to pay attention to. We have to meet that. For the sidewalk, I believe the IS call for 0.2 foot per candle. That's the average, yeah, on the sidewalks. And then on the road, about 0.3. All the sidewalks were the design that we did was at 0.2. And remember, and also we don't just look at today, we looked at the end of the life time of the fixture. So really we're looking at 20 years from now, we need to be able to meet those light levels. Right. So we design it at 0.2 on the sidewalk 20 years from now. We need to be able to get that number.
So you're,
No.
So yeah, basically,
Do you understand there's a
because the light, you know,
so you're
depreciate.
starting high to get.
Right.
Get there, yeah.
20 years from now, that's still going to meet a standard, knowing that 20 years from now, that light is going to dim over time.
based on there's depreciations, there is, there's a lot of factors that goes into the software. Yeah, so, and then it's, for the intersections, the light requirement is much higher because you have to account for two roads, really, intersections. That's why we have multiple fixtures, around the
But then it
intersections.
spills over.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but that's all accounted for in the design. Yeah, there's, I can't remember which intersections, but we still have to, we have to replace one of the higher wattage on one of the intersection with a lower wattage. After we've done, once we finish Lyman Avenue, there's one fixture at the intersection where we have to go in and drop it by half.
It's Wells South.
Wells.
Yep,
Wells.
Wells,
Yeah,
it's just,
right. Remember that Wells one where we saw that?
And then the Wells one, and Wells seems higher, it seems more intense light than the new one.
Yeah.
yeah, so the new lighting on Lyman allows us to go to a smaller wattage bulb at that southeast corner of Wells. I believe it's the southeast corner is that one that's right
Yeah,
there.
one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, that southeast corner lane.
Yep.
Yeah, I believe we can drop it by half,
Yeah,
the output of that fixture.
But then the question is the closeness of like the first drop off of that very well lit. That's us with no back,
Yep.
like with no place to go. So that's
Right.
sort of our protection.
Yeah. And really, the design on the sidewalk is barely on point. The point, the requirement, the 0.2 or the average 0.2. So really, we can't even move the poles like 1 foot. It's gonna drop it below the requirement.
or it's gonna require more light.
Or it's gonna
posts.
require add more lights, more poles, or increase the wattage of the fixtures.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give these guys a chance to.
Yeah, so we are required anytime we reconstruct the street in the city to take a look at the street lighting and bring it up to the code and the IS requirement as the policy, street lighting policy. So that's what we do right now. Anytime we reconstruct the street, we take a look at the lighting, and most of the street in the city, the lighting will change once we look at it because whenever it was built, it wasn't built to meet the IS requirement.
Right. Hold that thought.
Just one more, just
Yeah,
one more.
yeah, go ahead.
The reason that we went for the fiberglass poles was because, as folks know, the overhead feeder used to go behind all the houses on Lyman Ave. So we had to move, so by undergrounding the whole circuit, we moved everything street side. So the underground services to all the houses is underground. And because of that, we had to rip up those wood poles. And so the standard design to replace them is the gray pole with the Cobra head fixture. So.
We have two commissioners that are neighbors. I just wondered if you.
I'm not a neighbor.
Okay, she's friend. Okay, that if you've had any insight, I just want to open it up to your thoughts also. And I've got a couple thoughts myself about this. So
Yeah, so yes, I'm a neighbor just about a house away from Wendy. And so right next to our house abuts that Wells Street fixture. I guess I don't have any I don't have anything specific I want to bring up right now. But I just want to keep hearing the conversation and understand what's happening.
okay, I had a chance to think about this a little bit today, and then one of the what struck me the most is this is a subject that's near and dear to our hearts, and it comes up every now and then, and there's the usual changes that happen when lights get changed out, but I think you guys are in a little bit slightly different a situation because of the scope of the project. It wasn't just where on my street they just changed out the Cobra heads. You really didn't notice it. You had a much more bigger change to your neighborhood, which I think kind of made that
Well, I think it's on the street.
just
like-
made it seem more dramatic than maybe it would on a different street, as well as the fact that I think that you all live in like the 100-acre woods down there, where it's like an urban forest and darker than a lot of the streets around the city. So I think there's a few things that are sort of making this a bit more dramatic because of literally because there's so many more things that are getting changed in your
Well, I think the
neighborhood.
South End is, I think,
Yeah.
I had hoped that I would stay there for another 20 years. We'll see. But I think that there's a reason we all live there. And I understand, you know, you explained to us, you know, we were thinking just 30 feet, like even 10 feet lower. I mean, he's 6'6". It's just, if it was 10 feet lower, it wouldn't be in all our bedrooms, right? And
But would it be doing the job that it's there to do,
it-
as far as everybody else, not just you?
No,
And I'm
no,
not
no,
trying to, you know what I mean?
no,
Like,
and
so there's the
I've had
balance.
weekends, like I've had,
Yeah.
you know, it's been a day, but the weather kept people away. But you know, there's an email chain going around, and it's not the first go round. And
Yeah.
So I think I thought we were going to get the more aesthetically pleasing. And I wouldn't mind if there's more of them on Scarf. We just made the assumption, oh, they're taking 7 out there, we'll take their 7, you know, and it'll be a done deal. And the people were intimating, because we talked to the workers on the street, you know, and had conversations. And then when they showed up, it was like, oh, and then Houston, and you look at it. So it's just about measuring and looking. And Gary said the standard has changed. You know, Chip was on the board. He lives on Scarf. He didn't want them in his front yard. He didn't get them because he was lucky to get grandfathered in because of the old fixtures. When there's a new, because they, on Scarf, there was the old fixtures. That's why they got the grandfathered in piece. We got a letter from
Okay.
this. So we're adjusting. It would just be nice. If I didn't have.
And I wanted to make, and I hear,
No,
and we hear what you're saying.
No, I get it. You
Believe
do,
me.
because you took the time to come in and have a
absolutely.
conversation.
But I also wanted to make sure you heard where these guys are coming
No,
from,
I get it.
and
It's the liability issue and everything else, but it's just,
But I also think, I appreciate all the hard work, and God bless them, I'm not a designer, I'm not an engineer. But I think those rules should be somewhat flexible for different areas. I mean, common sense, I want to call it. I don't live downtown. I don't live on Oak Street. Because those are high density areas. We were out last night. If 3 people walk down that street,
nobody did.
or no, well,
Nobody
earlier,
did.
or 2 people walk down that street at night. If 3 or 4 cars went down the street that night, why do I have to live with all this light for the density? Well, I don't know what you want to call it, for the usage of the road during those times. Okay, I mean, I'm all for safety. I think what we had before was sufficient. I'm not saying we shouldn't upgrade it and be current. Point of fact, if I had come to you 5 years ago and said to you on the board that I don't feel safe in my neighborhood, it's not lit up enough, could you please put a light out in front of my house? You would have said, I don't think that's possible. There's no electricity there. That's what I think I would have gotten. I didn't have to do that, but the electricity runs down the alleyway in the back. There's nothing there, blah, blah, blah. So I think it works both ways. So now that you put the electricity out there, why do I have to have more lights? I'm not saying I'm not happy with, I was happy with 1, in for improvement, but I guess the volume, and that's what bothers me. And what it's done to the street and the neighborhood. And I know there are standards, and you say you have to start with this standard, so it's
To get there 20 years.
20
Let's
years
start
from
here
now.
and adjust it.
yeah.
And 30 feet in the air is higher than the house that I live in. Okay, so when I go into my bedroom, there's the light. There's the light shining, and my house is not big. I can't, if I want to go into a dark room and sleep, I have to live in my back. That's the only dark room. It's in the back of my house. And it hit because I have a new light in front of my house. You improve the light to the east, going up the street, towards Shelburne Road. So now I've got that light coming in at me, and I've got that light coming in at me on the other side. So all my bedrooms are literally lit up. So the quality of my life inside my home is greatly affected.
I have a question, because this issue, you're not the first ones to raise it with us. Of course, we were doing this last year with Scarf Avenue, and I think there was maybe,
Yeah.
there was another neighborhood earlier. Like, is there a process to do any engagement before the new light comes in? And I feel like we've had lots of conversations about the standards, and there's liability, and all of that is definitely something that, we're bound to do, right? I think there are clear experiences and things that have happened and that require certain, but I feel like we're always behind this issue instead of in front of it. And is there opportunity before a project like this goes out? I mean, typically, there is some notification to residents, an opportunity to sit down, talk through, explain what's gonna happen and why. And then it's not after the fact, it's a little bit before, and maybe there's a little bit of compromise we could have done, move things a little bit here or there, still met the standards. But I don't know why we missed that. I guess that's my question. Did we miss an opportunity because of the communications?
So
We just brought this
Yeah.
up. We were talking
Yeah.
about this just before the meeting, especially with the scale
Yeah.
of what went on
Scar.
in Lyman. It seemed to be a big enough project that it should have, or could have, would have, should have had a bit more.
So we did
Engagement.
send out a letter to all residents affected, which is our standard practice. We send out a letter
Just
saying-
telling them this is.
telling them this is happening, telling them that it will be let to IES standards, telling them, I believe the letter also stated that there would be new poles placed in. It did not describe what type of poles were going to be in there, but on the note, it was contact information for the engineer that was designing the project. And there was a number of residents who did call and ask for adjustments. And we tried to accommodate as many of those as possible to adjust them to make sure that folks were as happy as we could get them while still not compromising the standard. So there was that dialogue and that feedback loop happening. So yeah, that's our standard process.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I also wonder if there's some sort of, I know nobody really likes community meetings but some sort of work, because also we want to make sure we don't pit people against each other. Too,
Yeah.
right. But some sort of collaboration so we understand it's clear that why, and I don't know, but maybe you feel like.
No, I was talking with Scott about that prior to the meeting, and I don't think with how we only have a handful of these projects that happen every fiscal year, I don't think it's unreasonable to maybe set up a street side meeting prior to this to actually go through the details.
Here's our plan, here's
Yep.
what the poles look like, here's
Yeah.
where they're gonna go. Here's why they're being illuminated to the level
Yep.
that they are. And have everyone interested parties, and then they have an opportunity to speak before the infrastructure's in. Because I feel like Scarf, I don't think you were here when we did.
I was not.
Scarf.
We did
Yeah, that was a one that kind of took people by surprise, I think, all of a sudden, and that, and stuff was removed from Scarf. Yes, you pulled out.
Yeah, we
Anyway.
changed the lighting level.
Yeah,
yes,
so
based
I
on the new
think just
standards.
kind of maybe learning a little bit
Right.
from that experience. with it.
And also, just, I don't know if you remember, Bethany, but we spent like few months on what we're gonna do with the lighting.
Right, and we ended up right in the same place.
Exactly, so that's distracted us really from our process.
Yeah.
Could have started early, communicating.
Because the standards are the standards, we've looked at it a lot, and we've agreed to the standards. And the streets are classified by type, so it's not the same level of lighting for every street in Burlington. And residential streets have certain standards. So, but I do think maybe some conversation before things were put in could have helped maybe mitigate some of that.
Like I was mentioning to you earlier, like, should there be a threshold or some sort of a thing that where you go, maybe this project on this street, we do a level 2, a next level engagement because of the size and scope of what we're doing that.
Yep.
So we don't keep coming back and having these conversations over and over and over.
And I think if you look at neighborhoods, you're dealing with streets, right? We are a neighborhood, as far as looking at Scarf, Lyman, Ferguson, those of us have been there for 20, everybody
Yeah, sure.
knows each other.
Yeah.
And I think what people were looking at, it's not uniform. Why does Scarf get that? Okay, they're grandfathered in. I would prefer more lights that are prettier than, and maybe not right in front of my house and 60 paces down rather than 30. It would affect me because of the corner. but I think you look at it as a unit, and then there's equity amongst neighborhoods, and it's not, like, I don't know exactly what the changes are, for Ferguson, but there had to be changes for all of, like, we figured, we figured 3 times as charming, it would go right, but the guy that you hired who was the contractor who did the digging, he was PRing, like, but nobody from the city was out. We had to reach out, and you know, and my life was being complicated at that point in
Yeah.
time, so I didn't get
And-
here until it was actually
Right.
so.
And I mean, and understand that, you know, these folks here
Yeah.
don't live in the neighborhood, so they're
Right.
not looking at it from a,
But
I live here,
appreciate the
I live
fact
here.
that you looked and you're a
Oh, yeah,
Burlingtonian,
totally,
and
yeah.
people, and I think Gary had some people come down, but if you walk around
Before the planning starts.
before the plan, but it's not uniform amongst even our streets. That's what John was curious about, is as far as it's not uniform lighting. We were told that yes, everybody's getting the same lighting. They're different bulbs, they're different heights. It's different. But if you look at it as a package within, like, the Sisters, I don't know what's happening in the Sisters yet, or looking at Birch Cliff, like those are community neighborhoods within the city, at least the way the South End works.
I think you also have to realize that in our neighborhood, our houses are not, I looked at, Southwind, walked through theirs, and they have big tall poles and, you know, older lighting, but their setback off of their street is a lot better, a lot deeper, I should say, not better, just deeper. Whereas I look out my window and the light out of my bedroom window is probably 20 feet from my bed because it's up to 30 feet high. So that's another whole perspective, you know, putting the whole that up. And I think I'm in a unique situation, but so the depth of from my house to the actual lamppost is really close. It's really close.
So I think
So,
when you
yeah.
plot it on a map and look at it on your computer, it's different than what, and you saw that, and it seems better than your neighborhood, but you live in a more urban part of the city than we
Right.
do. So it's just, there's not uniformities around the neighborhood, there's this lighting standard, so that's
That's,
what's tricky and hard.
that's kind of what we're stuck with to a certain degree, yeah. Which makes it difficult for us because we're not really in a position to go, hey, you know what, because of, you know, these, we're gonna bend the rules a little bit.
But
Because it really has to be, you know, we need to look out for everybody. And I hate to, you know, I don't want to give you, you know, the answer you don't want to hear, but at the same time, we have to look out for,
so there
you know,
were
40,000
poles removed on
people.
Scarf, and there was poles
Yeah.
removed on Richardson, not Richardson, Ferguson. So that, it's just interesting to me. So, and
What?
I'll find out from the folks on the street. I just didn't have time.
But I just wanted to give Paul a quick chance to kind of chime in on like kind of what the overarching, you know, Paul's our safety guy here, and he kind of is the where the buck stops in a lot of these issues, and hopefully maybe you can sort of chime in on this.
Sure. All right, so I've been here 29 years. This topic has come up several times. We're right where we're back to, we're back in 1996 when our attorney, city attorney, in my world, my realm, wrote a very definitive answer that said, no matter what we do, we've got to meet IEA standards. And if you haven't seen a copy of our recent policy, you can see that is spelled out in there. So we've had, without getting into specific details, but for every customer that maybe calls, says it's too bright, there's some that's called saying too dark. Police has reached out to us several times. We've had a significant flame, and again, just, you can look it up, that shaped or really influenced the legal and insurance. We had 4 carriers that wouldn't write us anymore. We had to scramble. We had a significant increase in our premium because of a lighting issue in Burlington. Correct. Yeah, so.
We didn't even hear about it.
Yeah, so you can look that up online, but anyway, so all that has shaped our prior insurance broker has made it clear we're not going below IES standards. and our current insurance broker the same. And legal has weighed in 2022 and 96 with the same answer. So for all those reasons, from the risk management, insurance, legal liability, we cannot go below the IES standards. Certainly at any time there's a new street that's, engineered, they'll go out and check the lighting levels, make sure. And so, yeah, over the years, they've made changes, but never emphasis to drop below those IES standards. And of course, it does make a difference in where you live or where you live on the corner and so on. So that's unfortunate, but the harsh reality, if you will, from this perspective.
Maybe just offer a brief comment. I'm Darren, I'm general manager, and I'm sorry that you're feeling the way you are, and I appreciate that you came to the meeting as well. I just wanted to note, I was just confirming with Munir, I think the changes that happened on Ferguson and Scarf had to do with the IES standards changing while we were sort of in the midst of that project. And so we were able to go back with the updated standard and look at it kind of a second time and be able to make some accommodations there. So I just wanted to share that it wasn't arbitrary in that sense.
Yeah, no.
It was really just the
And there was
timing.
no education about the triangulation. I just was looking at the triangulation of the most well lit up corner in our neighborhood is my corner.
Right.
And I'm 30 paces. I'm the first house, and every single pole was 3 houses in.
Right.
So I have the overspill, and it's just
No, understood.
And so and Ron happens to be in that position, so I haven't had time to look at what the triangulation is on Ferguson, but they're also not, you left some of the old wooden poles on Ferguson as well. They're not all new industrial. So it's not, you didn't approach each street uniformly. So that's where it's like, well, why is there wiggle room? So we'll ask, in a sense, it's advocating for, I don't have a backyard, everybody else does. My lot's subdivided, so I can't get away from it.
Understood.
So, it's just, if it had been between those streets and moved it down a block, if somebody had walked it to see the impact of where the poles are, you could even rather position them on property lines so they're not in windows. That it's like, it's simple, it's quick, it's easy. It's part of what Bethany talked about. Walking the street. Scott did it. It takes time, but I think when you explain to people what's going on, we're just hearing it sort of through people who've come and done this. So I don't want to take up any more of your time.
Quick question. So are coming here, and I know you've gotten other calls. My neighbors have said they've called in with their concerns. So I guess my question is there going to be any chance of replacing the poles, lowering the poles, or possibly, if you lower the poles, maybe the lighting won't be as bright in people's windows. And I don't,
Will
I
10 feet
I
change
don't,
the standard?
I don't know. It does. I mean, light is light, and it.
Because it's a different,
Yeah,
it's a different
better.
footprint.
We just, today I asked my engineer, his engineer, to look at 25-foot poles versus 30-foot, and then look
Which
at
is 25
20-foot
feet off.
poles, and then 20-foot poles,
25-foot fiberglass poles. yeah.
fiberglass.
But you end up having to add more poles, correct?
He just looked at, basically, didn't have time, but he just looked at the existing location with those poles at 25 feet, and we don't meet the standard.
Right.
That's mean, if we go, even if we're gonna go to 25, we need to add more poles. Going to 20 feet, we have to add more poles.
Just find that so hard to comprehend. I'm not
Because,
saying
the
I don't
higher the
believe
pole,
you.
it cover more.
Right.
I
The
know.
lower down, the smaller the footprint.
Right, and
So you end up with more,
Stark has 7 poles in each block. We have 3,
I don't
so
want
it's
more.
twice as much, but
I know.
they're different.
So
So
I was just, is there a way that, probably it's all goes back to cost, but is there a way you're gonna have a lower pole that has a wider spread?
Yeah, a different light bulb sort of
Yeah.
effect.
Because I heard through some type of grapevine that we got like the cheapest $600 per pole option, so.
they're cheap. They're
This is really this is our standard light fixture, and really this is one of the best light fixture we have in the city to spread the light. The one you see on, for instance, on Main Street, these are decorative, expensive fixture, but you'll see how many, every like 40 feet.
Right,
we
they
have
don't
fixtures.
throw the
They
light
don't
as
throw the
well.
light.
It's nice. I prefer that, because it wouldn't be in my bedroom. That's
But
it's an aesthetically we're an old, it's not a historic neighborhood, but, you know, we're not a fancy neighborhood, but people want to live there.
It's a 100-year-old neighborhood. I mean, it's not a new neighborhood. And I don't know why, in this day and age, with so many new lights and so many new inventions, there should be
Something that's more
aesthetically pleasing and still safe,
And
I mean, the fact that when I said the light was coming into my bedroom and I called and I said, this is unacceptable, they already had a solution. So to me, that said, well, somebody else must have complained about this problem before me because they didn't have to go figure it out. They said, oh, we've got a solution. We'll put a shield on
We'll
there.
put shields on all of them.
You know, so I was like, okay, so this wasn't, what was people saying about this light before that? And not from our point of view, but from a manufacturer's point of view. They want to keep making their lights and selling them. So we'll come up with a solution for all these people and keep selling them our lights.
I think it's about balancing though, like some people want more light, some people want less.
Okay,
So you
yeah.
put the shield, so you have, design a light pole that works, and then if you can put the shield in if people need that.
Right. Doesn't mean the light.
But also, if you put
Doesn't
the
mean that the
shield
light
in,
was
it's going to lower the
wrongly
light
designed to
level,
begin with.
and you're going to need more. You're going to need possibly more fixtures. So the shielding is kind of cuts both ways, right? It helps whoever is looking at, whoever's experiencing the light coming in their window. But also, if you don't apply it correctly, or if you do apply it correctly, it could mess with the whole light levels on the street. So there's a balancing act. That, just to your point.
In particular on this street, where we're barely meeting the light level on the sidewalk. So
Yeah.
if you put shields, you're gonna mess the whole lighting
You have
design.
to add in more poles.
So, yeah, go ahead, Bob. You're the,
I am Bob.
then I want
Perry.
to try to wrap this up.
I'm Bob Herrandy, and been very engaged in this issue for a long time. Duration. I heard some comments about just the dark sky. Full disclosure, I'm a member of what used to be called the Dark Sky Association, now it's just called Dark Sky. What we call standards are recommendations from the IES, but we've accepted them as our standards with strong legal reasons to do so. But there is some tweak room at the edge of that. You mentioned, for example, the color. That can be changed and has been in some places to warmer kinds of light. There is also some rumbling, I think, from IES, but certainly from other places, about dimming later at night. You need a certain technology to do that, but anyway, that's out there. So there are a number of things that are being rumbled about, and I'm looking at the young people here saying, I don't know where you are in your educational track.
Sophomore in architecture.
Okay.
Yeah, we do a standards too.
Okay, to get into this at a detailed level for a class project, you know, as I see it, would be a great idea. And you would be digging into out there at the edge where these things are coming. They'll come slowly, and especially here because of our legal background, but it's interesting stuff. For changes to occur, you know, typically any battle these days takes 10 years. I don't know if that's comforting. Anyway, so 2 points. Call me up and I'll poison your mind about how you can do a project. Somebody, not for me. And second, there are a few things out there that are tweaking at the edge of what we talked about as unchangeable standards even for us, particularly color and dimming.
Which right now we're not doing.
Right, we heard about dimming last
Yeah,
night.
yeah, I mentioned
But
it.
as far as even
So-
looking at, we were talking even the corner lights, the ride, and just having them down, and if, I mean, I don't know if I have to ask or request that it would be great if somebody could put a shield on or adjust. Well, Kate will have to call, I guess, but the corner lights, and the Wells Street is much brighter.
So,
That's, do
But
I need to?
my two takeaways, I think, Seth, I don't think you're gonna walk out of here with what you want to hear. That being said, and I hope that's because we've explained to you, and especially these guys have explained kind of the pretty tight box that we're in. However, that being said, I think you're going to get some relief at that southeast corner of Wells. So, especially for you,
But even just looking at the other one on Wells, can the lights on Wells, this is the question for the engineers, can they have shields on them? Because there's a lot of them, they're not, it's not underground, they just stuck a light up on a new pole.
Yeah, we have to take a look at those.
but I'll leave it with this. Let's just, can we at least
We'll
take a look at that?
I mean,
Can I
and I
give-
guess it's just, and my question is, just as a taxpayer, as a resident, is Wells the same as,
Yeah, the same.
the same,
We read
reading as what's Gary had
recently.
as
right.
Richardson? So are Wells and Richardson uniform as far as lighting and light levels? And I don't know if somebody could email the light levels. John will go out with his headlight.
Okay.
He'll do all the readings. That's sort of what he does. You know, I don't need a headlamp. I could garden with the spillback from Wells in my side yard, and I only have a side yard in my front porch, so I'm effective. So if I had a bigger house and a backyard, it wouldn't feel as important, but.
Can I offer you this? I'll offer you this. Can we just at least confirm one way or the other what the lighting levels are on the streets, so that we all know that it's a uniform thing? A, and then B, just take a look at the possibility of, and communicate with them about the possibility of guards on the lights we're talking about.
Yep. Look at
One way or the, does that
Yeah, and I'm
Does that
not
work?
gonna get the light.
I mean, I'm just trying. I'm trying to offer some solutions in just this, in what little way we can. If we can offer that, then it's kind of the best we can do, because we are kind of hamstrung by a lot of different.
So if the cost of the, what do you call the prettier lights, you need more of them. Part of me, I wouldn't care if there was more, because I've got it. If I had a nicer pole and everybody else had more poles, oh well. I think aesthetically, that's what people were complaining about.
Yeah.
And the height in their bedrooms. But the aesthetics aren't as important. It's the standard. See, but as a homeowner, and resale value and everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's ugly. And it's harsh, because it's,
Yeah, I hear you.
I
I just wish I could give you a
you know.
different answer, and I'm trying to.
So you
balance
won't take the
between-
pole- You won't take the pole.
I'm giving you an inch, and I'm not giving you a mile.
So with the, well, or not the wells, what are the ones, the black ones?
Scar.
Yeah,
Scar.
so they were grandfathered in, what does that mean? Or where was the approach that they got those poles, or how did they get those? Not in like, I know she talked about the whole, looking at it as a neighborhood, but like, if there was to be an approach for more poles that were lower, I don't think we would be against that, and I know it's like already been done related to the whole thing, but where did those come from? Because I feel like the big thing for me is, the higher, they don't look residential, looks like an airport, and if they were lower and more of them, I don't think that would be an issue, because I think,
They're not ugly. I mean, that's, yeah.
where did those,
I can tell you, we do this on the next street down, some other street down the other. They'll be like, why is there so many, and why can't we have just a few higher ones? I mean, we'll get just the opposite.
But to answer the question,
They had those type of fixtures on the pre-existing. So really,
Prior to the
this is
standard.
yeah.
the policy basically
Right.
said if they had them already, you replace them with that. But it didn't say to replace everything with that. But it is true, exactly what Scott was saying, because when we've been through this in prior situations where you look at adding the lower poles, like you're suggesting, it ends up impacting somebody else in a different way than they are now, and it's a really tough situation. And I also want to say, the last thing we want is to be upsetting our customers. Like, we want to be helping, supporting our customers, helping you with all the things that we try to do. And we're sort of in a challenging spot with this, because we've been tasked by the city with doing this work. And then we are constrained because of our liability insurance with doing it to a certain standard. So then we try within that to make everybody as happy as we can, but I appreciate that the impacts can be, different, in different lots as you're
Well, it's not,
saying.
it's not equitable within the streets.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
appreciate what you're saying
I
about
just
that.
have a quick question, about, like I said before, we had the one night, everybody seemed to be happy, we had no problems, no, liability wise, that type of thing. So, just because you put the wires underground,
The policy says essentially anytime we do, well, there's two things that can
I mean, why,
trigger.
I mean, put the wires underground, but why did you have to add more lights?
So that's our policy, because we don't have enough money in a budget in a given year to kind of redo the entire city, right?
Okay, I understand. that
So,
part,
so
yeah.
you have to take it incrementally to bring things up to
Right.
code. And the policy that we have says, if you called us as you talked about earlier,
Yeah.
and you said, hey, my street is not safe, like, we would then do a lighting study,
Right.
and we would get you on the list for a potential upgrade, regardless whether we're doing infrastructure work there or not. But then the second piece is, if we are doing infrastructure work, it's required under the policy that we look at the street lighting at the same time. And that's why this is happening the way it is. Yeah.
That I understand. I mean, we were all satisfied with the amount of lighting that we had, and
Right,
just putting wires underground, why would that change?
Yeah.
But now you think,
yeah,
I don't agree with it.
I understand. No, I understand. I
mean,
understand.
Like the
I
bottom
live in
line.
Burlington and I have a large street lighting pole that's opposite side of the street on my house that I can see. And I'm used to it, and I don't even think about it, but I understand what you're saying.
I want to know, is it, how wide is it? I mean, that's the other thing, the aesthetics of these gray poles. I mean, if you had put a skinny black pole, it might not be. We wouldn't be this. It wouldn't be as bad. I'd still complain, but.
Yeah, it's the bigger one. I don't know if it's gray or if it's sort of like a off gray color.
I mean, I looked at the ones on Birch Cliff, and I could wrap my hands around the base.
Yeah, no, these are the poles that we have
And
similar.
these
in
poles
Miami.
right out of Dodge,
Yeah, yeah,
The circumference was just,
yep. No, so, understood.
so I'd like to cut 10 feet off from the bottom, lower it, and use the same pole.
Please don't do that.
No,
So, anyway,
It's only fiberglass. I know we can have them.
We will follow up on the shield
Yes,
question with
the
you
shield and the light.
directly
levels.
and the
yeah.
light level.
and
And
we'll-
also
The
schedule,
light levels, I'm telling, the shields improved it greatly,
Okay,
but still not making me perfectly happy.
Yeah, and that, like, the man who didn't show up will go out with the light meters, and, that's sort of,
Yeah.
and people are, and I think people just have to realize that. So I appreciate your time.
and we'll change our process going forward, basically for residential street. We'll go for a meeting.
Yeah.
It might be nice to take a look at having maybe a
Street.
second tier,
Yep.
like
Absolutely.
figure out much where something comes to like a level of difference of construction, whatever. You go, wait a minute, we need to have a more
I've heard
in
from
depth.
enough residents that they did not see the letter.
Yeah.
That it is
Yeah,
enough to say.
something's
we
not
need to
right.
Do a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yep.
So, yeah, we take that
So-
as a no.
But I think the community engagement, I mean, I appreciate that you made the effort to come down. And I had said to somebody, come down and have a beer and walk the street at night, and.
Lo and
look
behold,
at
that's what I
the
did.
impact of- You did it, so we had the conversation, but, I guess it's saying it publicly so that more people hear.
Yeah.
Where we're coming from, and I think your contractor, who wasn't even a city employee, because you contracted out, he had interpersonal skills and was sort of trying to smooth the ways, but.
Sounds like we need to rein that in too, because that seems like there was this.
No,
I
no,
feel like there was
no,
some
no,
disinformation.
no,
Okay, all right.
I mean, I appreciate, because I was home, I work in school, so I was home last summer sometimes, and saw it happening, but I don't know where, but we were all under the impression that we were getting black light poles, and that's what the big shocker was.
Um,
And FYI, in the description, I got the first letter a year ago, I came in, I walked in, talked to Stephen Scott.
Yep.
About my concerns, and that's all I did, okay? Then, when I got the second letter, I emailed him, and his response was, I was like, in the second letter that was out in May, it said, we're putting in poles and we're putting in this blah, blah, blah light bulb. That meant nothing to me.
Show
Okay.
pictures, take a
So,
picture of what you're
so
getting.
then I
Right.
emailed him back, I said, could you be a little more descriptive? Because he said, this was May, and then and he said they're coming in June 5th to put them in. And then he said it's a 30-foot pole with, you know, whatever. The light still didn't register with me because I have to see it to, you know what it's gonna look like. But that's when the description came in, a week before they put the pole in.
You just take
Right.
a picture of what you're putting in, send it out in a letter. I mean, then you're not
Just
probably
just a
getting
thought.
people reacting. I mean, and we calmed down. maybe a little bit.
From last night, you've calmed down considerably. So anyway, I just want to wrap, kind of,
Just a thought, you know.
No, thank you.
so I just want to wrap this up. I think the engineers are gonna reach out to you guys and help out what you can. It looks like you might get a little bit of help from that southeast corner over on Wells, and I hope you understand. Thank you for coming. I hope this gives you and your neighborhood a better understanding of where we and the department are coming from. And I want to thank you for this, because out of this, I think your participation here tonight is going to help our process with other neighborhoods going forward. So there's a positive out of this.
No, I hopefully it was, and I don't, yeah, I think, and you guys learned something about what community engagement.
Yeah, no, this is exactly the kind of engagement we want to have here on these Wednesday nights. So I appreciate you. As much as you're not going home with the answer you want to get, but
I knew after last night that.
yeah, I kind of laid it out.
I
So
didn't even want to show up in the rain, but I got.
no, we appreciate it, because we got more out of this, but there's a chance for improvement here. So that's always a good thing. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. We'll move on to item number 4, Commissioner's Corner. Do we have any commissioner items other than all that stuff we were just talking about? Other things that are going on that commissioners want to bring up?
Scott, you and I were talking, we're going to discuss what happened yesterday at the biomass symposium.
Yep.
Maybe, Darren, you're going to.
I think we'd lead that off with, okay, so, yeah, so we'll go on to item number 5, the general manager's update, and I'm sure that'll be part of the conversation.
Jump to that now?
Yep, you have the floor.
Great. So a couple items before we touch on that. Strategic direction, it's that time of year. Update the 23-24 strategic direction. We have a couple of items that I'm aware of that we'll bring to you. I'm hoping we can have this as an agenda item in July, that we'll send you something ahead of time and you can look at it, and then we can discuss it, and you can add whatever you'd like, and then we can adopt it. I'm aware of one mild wording change that the city attorney has suggested in our equity-focused bullet to make that a little more specific in a way that is appropriate. So I've heard that from the city attorney. Our team is looking at it as we do each year, sort of bottom up, asking each area to take a look at their items and suggest any changes. So we'll send something around hopefully in the next week or so. And give you some time to look at it. And also, if you have thoughts, if individual commissioners want to reach out to me with any thoughts, or we can talk about it in July. I just wanted to flag that time of year. On legislative items, I mentioned S-137 was signed into law by the governor. There were some media stories, including on Vermont Public Radio, about BED getting this new authority to focus on these gasoline they're calling them super users. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but it's essentially somebody who has a long commute and uses a lot of gasoline. How helping them get into an EV could have a disproportionately beneficial impact from a climate standpoint and a cost standpoint. So we have new authority that we'll hopefully be able to use starting in January of 2024 to help those customers, and we're excited about that. There also was a renewable energy standard working group that BED will be a part of. I think I'll share this because it's in the media commentaries. Renewable Energy Vermont is making a number of statements about how Vermont relies on natural gas elsewhere in the region. I think that's not accurate in terms of the way that we account for energy use. Obviously, we're all connected to the same grid, and it's no secret that the ISO New England grid is over-reliant on natural gas. It's also true that Burlington Electric's more than 100% renewable, using the standards that we use, which is accounting for that with renewable energy credits to match or exceed our load. And so I think most other utilities in Vermont are either getting there, or a few of them are already there like we are. So I think it's misleading to talk about Vermont's reliance on natural gas from an energy standpoint. because Vermont doesn't contract with natural gas plants by and large for energy. And Vermont doesn't necessarily rely on the system mix from ISO New England for a large portion of our energy mix. So I'm concerned about that. This will obviously be part of a policy conversation that happens, but we're going to be looking out for Burlington customers in that conversation. Carbon fee ordinance, we have had some conversations and done some work with city councilors with the hopes that that ordinance will be introduced either at the next city council meeting, which the chairman and I will be at on Tuesday, because we have Juneteenth on Monday. It'll be 6:20 meeting. Or if not, at a subsequent city council meeting that will work with the TUC and the ordinance committee this summer to move that forward. That item was voted on town meeting day. We'd like to implement that for 2024. And I mentioned a number of EV charging initiatives. We had our press event on the 13th, which feels like it was a long time ago, but it was yesterday. And that was at the Old North End Community Center with CarShare Vermont and with the Champlain Housing Trust to release the Net Zero 2022 data, which is now up on our website, which I'm going to run through with you in a few minutes, and which we're sharing with the council as well on the 20th. We also highlighted a new charging station and a new CarShare EV with charging station that's available in the Old North End, courtesy of our partnerships with Light, CarShare, and CHT. And then lastly, before we jump to the TUC forum, our rate change for FY24 was approved unanimously, Board of Finance and City Council. I know that finance team is working on getting that ready for filing along with policy and planning and doing all that necessary work. So we expect to have that filed in mid-June and it'll be effective on customer bills rendered September, which is a change. We've typically had it in August. It's going to be 1 month later this year. So that'll be happening. We're also waiting for, hopefully very soon, action on the prior year's rate change, which is a surcharge on the bill and which has pending approval from the PUC, will be added to the underlying rates, but we haven't gotten that approval just yet, so we're waiting on that. Okay, TUC
Can I
form.
ask a question before you go to TUC form?
Yes,
So this idea of the super users for the
Yes.
EVs, super interesting.
yes.
Because how do you identify them? But it sort of leads into this larger question that we all have to figure out is instead of a gas tax, moving to a VMT tax.
Right.
And then the answer would be more about incentivizing rather than identifying and,
Right.
right?
On the VMT, I think the transportation bill has that component in it this year. The transportation bill that was just studied has a component about moving Vermont towards a VMT fee over the longer run, which would be
Vehicle miles traveled, so
Vehicle
instead of
miles
paying
traveled.
at the gas pump, because you have more EVs, you still need to replenish the highway trust fund
Right.
and support public transit. So, yeah, that's interesting.
But for us, the incentive could be as simple as saying, send us your vehicle registration odometer reading, or something like that. Or it could be as easy as, can you self-certify that you're driving X number of miles per
More than
year or
20,000
more?
or something.
We found our customers generally are very accurate with these types of self-certifications. For our income qualification, for example, we don't verify people's income. When somebody says, hey, I am low income, I meet the standard that you've set out on the rebate form, we do a self-certification for that. We do income verification in an indirect way for our low income rate, our energy assistance program, but we do that through other programs. So we would try to make this as easy for a customer to participate in as possible while still having some sort of a standard for what constitutes a person who is using more gasoline than the average for Burlington.
Okay, so it could either be like a highly inefficient vehicles or high mileage vehicles or something. Well, it's probably a bus is your best bet still, but.
Yeah, and the group that's working on this nationally, Cultura, and we worked with VPIRG and Cultura on this authority, they make the point that in a lot of ways this is an equity kind of initiative, because in a lot of cases, somebody who is commuting a long number of miles or driving an inefficient vehicle, the correlation with income qualification in their research is fairly strong. So if we are able to boost those incentives on top of the income enhanced incentives that we offer, we may be in the position of offering certain of our income qualified customers an even better incentive, which would be something we would be very excited about. But more to come. The team's working on updating our demand resource plan to accommodate this new authority. So, okay, TUC forum. We had Commissioner Herendeen, Chair Moody there. Our materials are all up on the website if you'd like to see them on the Burlington Electric page under the McNeil sub-bullet on the energy, our energy page. We have the McNeil page. Right at the top, new reports. There's my PowerPoint from yesterday evening. There is the carbon and forestry analysis from Innovative Natural Resource Solutions. And there is the draft GREET score, which is the carbon intensity model that is being utilized as part of the Affordable Heat Act that passed by the legislature, was developed by Argonne National Lab. That analysis was conducted by First Environment and commissioned by VGS, not by BED. So what we shared was that the carbon score for district energy came out for McNeil. It's very specific to McNeil at a 3.6 grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule of energy. Natural gas is a 79. So that means that we're reducing emissions potentially over 95% in the GREET score for district heat. And that is consistent with the independent third-party analysis done by VEIC that also showed a reduction for district heat using an older version of the system. The other analysis is from Innovative Natural Resource Solutions, and that looked at a question that was part of the TUC's questions for us, which is, have you been able to characterize on an annualized basis over a period of time what the forest change is essentially in the areas harvested compared to the stack emissions? And one of the points I tried to make, probably not as artfully as I wish I could to get information out, is that with biomass accounting, whether it's the IPCC or the EPA or the Federal Council on Environmental Quality or the Agency of Natural Resources here in Vermont, the idea is you do not want to double count the emissions from wood by counting them once when the tree is cut and once when a tree is burned. You can only count them once to be accurate. And the way that all of those conventions discuss it is you count them in the forest and land use change when the tree is harvested. And the net flux in that change is where the emissions are captured, not at the stack. This report covers our stack emissions. It shows them on a chart from 2007 to 2020 for illustrative purposes. And then it shows the land use change in the forest timberlands where we harvest, and shows that between 2007 and 2020, we added over 24 million tons of CO2 equivalent in the trees in the areas where we harvest. Now, McNeil doesn't claim that from a legal standpoint. We don't own those lands. We're not the only forest user in that space. But the report makes clear that McNeil's forest management plans, its sustainable approach, is contributing to that. And obviously, if that was the other way, if we had lost 24 million tons of CO2 net in the areas we harvest, I'm certain people would have a concern about that, as would I. So the fact is that the net additions are significantly larger on an annualized basis than the stack emissions from McNeil, which points to at least the sustainability of the operations of the plant, in that we're able to operate and we're able to continue to add net forest carbon. The professors who were presenting from Massachusetts had the point that we could be adding even more forest carbon if we weren't harvesting. And there were a lot of discussions around that. Our point back and the forestry community that was present was that it's possible those lands might not be economically viable without the value for the tops and the limbs that McNeil provides. And 88% of our fuel is essentially coming from what's called in-woods chips, which are largely these tops and limbs that are left over from a higher value paper making or saw log or furniture operation. And we're providing an economic value for that that helps keep the land as working land. So we can have sort of different hypotheticals, different counterfactuals that lead you to different results. We stand behind the analysis that's specific to McNeil that we've presented. Obviously, there's different points of view in the community, and the key thing for us is the question really isn't whether or not to build a biomass plant. We did that back in the 1980s, and that remains a really critical resource for us. From a regional reliability, a Vermont reliability standpoint, a dispatchability during times of the year where energy prices are high, where renewable energy generation is low, and where natural gas is constrained. There's no question in my mind that McNeil will continue to play an important role for the near and medium term in terms of our energy portfolio. The question is, do we want to make the improvements to McNeil with district heat that would allow it to become a more efficient combined heat and power plant as it was originally envisioned, and help us to displace approximately 16% of the natural gas use in the commercial sector in Burlington, consistent with our net zero energy roadmap? And that's a question we hope to be able to bring to the city council if we're successful completing the feasibility work with district energy and getting term agreements with the key partners sometime in the next few months. And Glad to answer questions or glad to hear from the chair or Commissioner Herendeen additional observations about yesterday as well. It was obviously a lengthy meeting. There were a number of perspectives shared and public comment as well.
floor
Well,
is
thank you,
yours.
but I was gonna throw the ball to Scott because the two visiting experts showed up at the mayor's breakfast this morning, which I didn't know about, but Scott was there.
And, you know, a lot of the same topics from last night, which was I felt like it got less on McNeil, so much more just about generally carbon sequestration. And what struck me on their side was she had that last graph that was very blocky, and that I don't think she illustrated it well, but she had a good point that, you know, we could stop today, but there's a big lag in time for that, for something we do today to really catch up to itself.
Right.
You know, there's a big lag in the system. The other thing that struck me was that, and I don't know where it's right or wrong, was their dismissal of your point of of where trees or this above ground carbon cycle as and discounting all the fossil fuels that we're bringing up that have been sequestered for millions of years being additive to the amount of carbon or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. They were kind of dismissive of that, and that didn't jive with the argument that they were trying to make about the overall argument of removing CO2 from the atmosphere. There was one takeaway that I felt in their corner about, one that I really strongly did not.
And I think to get to the kind of heart of it, and you know, not everyone maybe agrees with me about this, but I, as somebody who's worked my entire career on climate and energy, my understanding from all of the scientific organizations that have called attention to this problem is that human activity, primarily, not exclusively, but primarily the burning of fossil fuels since the industrial age, is what's driving the carbon challenge in the atmosphere. That doesn't mean that land use change can't play a role. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be responsible in terms of our forestry. We absolutely should. But I think that the scope of the challenge from fossil fuels relative to the potential scope of the challenge from above ground carbon are really different. And we should recognize that. And we should focus on what we can do to impact the use of fossil fuels, which are a finite resource. They're not a renewable resource on any timescale that human beings have any thought about. And so that I struggle with that point, because I think if we take our eye off of the ball relative to reducing fossil fuel use, we've lost something in the efforts that we're making. Beyond that, I think the real question is the ISO grid marginal fuel when we operate McNeil is natural gas, and when it's not gas, it's coal and oil. If the marginal fuel that would replace McNeil was wind, for example, 100% of the time, we might be having a very different conversation. We'd be having a conversation about, do you want to run wind or McNeil? That's an interesting conversation. That's not the conversation we have. That's not the conversation we're going to be able to have for a period of time.
Right.
The region needs a bunch more wind and a bunch more hydro just to reduce its reliance on natural gas. And when we get to a point where we've done that, and we want to debate what's better, is it wood, is it nuclear, is it wind, that's a really interesting conversation to have, a much more nuanced conversation. One of the points that Professor Kasiba from UVM, who was with us, made was that Vermont produces something on the order of 90% of the wood that we utilize as a state. Not wood energy, just wood. And that Massachusetts, which has stopped harvesting essentially and has not counted wood as part of its renewable energy standard anymore, is only using about, or only producing about 2% of the wood being used in the state of Massachusetts. That was her point. And that means that their wood demand for furniture, for anything else that they're using wood for, is from out of state or maybe even out of country. Could be putting pressure on development in places that we definitely wouldn't want to see it from a climate standpoint, like the Amazon was one of her points. And so I think that's a really important point too, because Massachusetts has taken a really different approach with wood than Vermont. But this is a local renewable resource, not something that's mined underground and piped in from somewhere, out there. This is something that's in our backyard that we're able to, utilize for good purpose. So there's a lot of nuance to the conversation, but we come to this with some thought as well, and appreciate that there's an opportunity for community conversation around it.
Absolutely.
What would the political folks say?
The city councilors?
Yeah.
They were appreciative of the dialogue. I think they felt like maybe we had gotten somewhat closer, but not all the way there in terms of having some common understanding and language. But they acknowledged there remained a gulf, I think, in the room. And I don't know that I could characterize it much beyond that.
Yeah, they didn't really have a whole lot to say. They were just listening because there was a lot of other people talking.
Yeah, I talked to the two, and likewise. In fact, at the end, it was kind of returned to the ideas. Do we really have the adequate definitions and all that? So I would say, first of all, I said to you last night, I'll repeat that. Your presentation was super.
Thank you.
Really delivered all the issues clearly. And the PowerPoint, I don't know who put it together, but if they're consultants, stick with them, and if they're in-house,
Just
take
me.
them out for steak dinner.
It was just me. But we were pulling together information from the various reports that we've,
Okay,
wasn't,
but it looked like a technical paper. It was really,
thanks.
okay. Okay, so having said that, I think the other guys, Mumaw and Rooney, Gargett,
Yep.
didn't do that good a job of just laying out their case. Now, I was being, critical as sort of an academic, but the word lags, which is absolutely crucial, was never uttered. There was a slide, you pointed that out, Scott, that kind of delivered it if you were watching. But that's the issue. And so I'll quickly just comment on that and say, when it's all over, I wish they made it more clear, but in the end, I think they were talking more generally, as you pointed out, about using biomass in general. First of all, here's my takeaway. Carbon from biomass is like a poison arrow. You're shot with a poison arrow, and you can yank it out immediately, or you can wait a week. If you yank it out immediately, you probably survive. If you yank it out a week from now, you're probably dead because the poison has been there. So likewise, when carbon is put in the atmosphere, the question is how long it stays there. That's the issue. And there are lags in all systems. If you're trying to take care of fossil fuel, we're talking about tens of thousands of years, millions. If you're talking about biomass, it depends, but it might be decades, might even be as much as a century. And that's really the issue. After that, we get into questions, and this was mentioned by Adam Sherman,
Mhm.
of boundary conditions or assumptions. What's the reference case, which is tweaked madly, depending on what argument you want to make. And then finally, in the end, there's always a reference to, well, we're small anyway. Anyway, I saw that as sort of a sequence that I wish had been laid out. And then at the end, just saying, look, it's about lags, people. Concentrate on the lags, and how much is up there. Now how much went up last year? How much went up last year, and how much fell out last year? So a very academic thing is what I took away from this. I think I'll stick with that. I think they could have done a better job, and therefore, folks who said they were still confused would have been somewhat less confused.
I just want to be clear, the PowerPoint's really drawing from resources, from a variety of resources.
I'm not
both-
talking about yours.
No, I know, but both our reports and then also kind of the resources we have from our forestry team, from our policy team. So, that's just the BED data distilled into a PowerPoint in one place, and it was dense on purpose. It's not the type of PowerPoint we usually like to do with more graphs, charts, pictures. It was dense because we wanted to live on the website as a reference document for people who want to, look at what we were putting and what the citations were for what we were putting out there.
Well, it looks very complete.
Yeah, no, thanks.
Floor's still yours.
That's everything I have. I know we're deep into our time, so I'll stop there. I think we have the financials and then two presentations that we'll try to keep as brief as we can for you from myself and from James. But
Sounds good. Thank you for indulging the previous thing too, because
Oh, no,
it's important.
good conversation to have as well.
Yeah, and I just would encourage the other the three of you to watch that. It was a very compelling discussion. Yeah, so moving on to item number 6, financials. Emily is up to the plate.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Here to present the results for April FY23. For the month, we had a net income of $868,000, way better than our budgeted net loss of $1.376 million. Big story with that is it's due to the timing of the receipt of rec revenues that we got early. So we budgeted to receive them in May. We received a bunch of them in April. So therefore, that's the reason for the big positive variance to budget. Going through our usual details, starting with revenues, sales to customers was better than budget by $63,000, so just very slightly. That's about evenly split between residential and commercial customers. Other revenues was better than budget by $167,000, most of that EEU reimbursements. And then on the third line, you see the positive delta of $975,000. That's the power supply rec revenues that we received in April instead of in May when we had budgeted to receive them. Then moving on to net power supply expense. We had a positive variance there to budget of $146,000. Again, net power supply expense is made up of fuel and transmission and purchase power and capacity and sale of any excess energy. So looking at those components, fuel was $163,000 favorable. McNeil was off the entire month. We had planned to run a little bit, so that accounts for the variance in the fuel. Transmission fees were slightly favorable, and then those variances were offset by the $128,000 Mystic charge, as well as some, we saved also on the purchase power side a little bit with some lower wind production. And because McNeil was offline, we didn't have excess energy to sell. We were purchasing from the exchange, and luckily for us, prices were low when we were buying from the exchange. So we had lower than budgeted energy prices for those purchases. Other operating and maintenance expense was favorable to budget by $739,000. Some of that, about $150,000 due to labor and overhead savings from vacancies. We also had a big favorable variance in outside services. A lot of that due to, if you remember, we had an overage in operating expense that I told you was related to work on the GT that we were going to capitalize. So we've moved that to capital expense, and so therefore there's a positive variance there now in April. Other income was favorable to budget by $133,000, made up of customer contributions that came in April, as well as interest income, about $50,000 better than budget. So year to date, we stand at a net income of $231,000. It's about 1.7 million worse than where we had budgeted to be at this point in the year. Questions on income statement activity before I go to capital and the
So is the
cash?
gap getting
Yeah.
bigger or smaller?
Sorry.
The the negative, or is it getting worse or better?
Well, it's looking better at the moment because the rec revenue, right, is
Yeah.
coming in early. So it's going to kind of be back to where we thought it would be, essentially. So it's temporarily better, right? But then in May, we'll see that we'd budgeted to receive rec revenue, and then it came early, right? So we'll have a negative variance in May.
Are you also just asking generally trajectory? Is it we stop the can you, does it look like it's a better picture?
Yeah, actually I can. So in terms of net income, right, we talked about the accounting treatment, right, to amortize the $4 million loss of revenue from sales of excess winter energy. We're going to include that request in our rate case when we file on Friday. So that will help with the income side and the adjusted debt service coverage ratio. On the cash side, I'll just go there.
I do have a question. Speaking of rate increases, we actually sold fewer kilowatt hours than we expected to, but we have increased rates, so that's why we have a positive variance on the,
No, we have not implemented the rate
okay,
request.
so then a question, I guess.
Hmm.
We sold less energy than we budgeted, but we got a positive variance on the,
Let me check out the slide you're looking at.
page 3.
Page 3 total. Oh, yes, you're right.
Could be
Commissioner
which kilowatt
Herendeen.
hours we sold and what rate they're at. Right? Sector
Yeah,
by
this is the
sector.
total. That's the total. And then if we look at residential, that's below budget. Commercial below budget. 17.5. 6034. Yeah, that. I need to check into that, Commissioner Herendeen. We might have it might be that the graph is off,
Oh,
right? So let me follow up on that one. So I'm gonna come back to your questions about cash and forecasting year end. So capital spending, we've as of April had spent 6.5 million compared to a budget of around 8 at that time, so about 72% of the capital budget. May and June are busy months for capital work. So I expect we will do pretty well in terms of spending our full capital budget this year. As you know, for you, those of you who were here during COVID, we had a lot of budget money that went unspent during that time. So it's good to be catching up. As of April 30th, we had total operating cash of 5.73 million. So I'm just looking for my notes here. Oh, I closed my notes. Get them back. That's compared to a budget of $9.1 million. So compared to a budget of $9.8 million. So we're about $4.2 million off of kind of where we had budgeted to be at this time. And I checked, we've been $4 million short of cash since December. So has it gotten better? No, but the delta has not grown either, right? We've been $4 million short of budget since December. And as you can see, that's 85 days cash on hand for the most recent 12 months. And we have a adjusted debt service coverage ratio for April of 0.92, and the regular debt service coverage ratio is 2.96. So in terms of cash, we have reached out to our Moody's analyst to kind of give him an update on how our year has gone, what the winter prices were, the impact that's had on us, and specifically our cash position, our plan to seek regulatory approval to get accounting treatment to amortize that expense. We let him know we'll be filing the rate case on Friday, as well as let him know that we are expecting to end the year with less than 90 days, which, you know, is not typical for us. As of the last forecast we did a couple weeks ago, we're forecasting to end around 65 days for the year. So, yeah. Our May results were slightly higher than we had projected them to be, so maybe there's a little bit of upside opportunity there that'll be better than 65, but that's where.
90.
Huh?
Yeah, it's not gonna be 90. right?
Not going to be 90. Yeah, exactly.
we're evaluated on the 3-year average, so that'll remain above 90.
Mhm.
And I think given that this was sort of a unique winter pricing issue, that we can address the adjusted debt ratio with the accounting order. You can't address the cash, at least not immediately. But the trajectory should improve with the new budget because we're not going to be assuming some of the same assumptions that we had in this budget. So it's not a fully conservative budget, but it's a more conservative budget. And obviously we get the benefit of the additional rate change in September to hopefully address that as well.
Any other questions? That's
Other questions?
okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Next item on the agenda would be the net zero update, and that would be from General Manager Springer.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here.
Thank you, Emily.
So I'm going to move through some of this relatively quickly because you already know it. We did just have this 3 years in a row now, I think, that we've been the top city per capita in solar in the Northeast and now really in the East. I think the mayor phrased it as east of the Mississippi. So this is the Environment America Shining Cities Report in terms of solar per capita. In addition, I think we've talked about this in the past. We continue to strive to be above the orange line here, which is the required amount for Tier 3 electrification incentives through the state. And we had a big jump in 2020 when we had the 2 electric buses and the Hula geothermal. And even without those, we've been able to exceed it both in 21 and 22. We are hopeful there will be some additional electric buses coming in the near future. We also have our electric bucket truck arriving soon and some other geothermal opportunities, including at the high school. So some opportunity to continue to drive this up even as we also grow our EV and heat pump adoption and other incentives. We've talked about this one before as well. When we launched the green stimulus in the midst of the pandemic in June, I believe, of 2020, if you compare residential Tier 3 residential heat pump incentives and installations, we're over 22x compared to where we were then. So really sizable growth in the residential heat pump sector, which is great. Still not at the level we need trajectory-wise, but getting up there. And then just a reminder in terms of the net zero roadmap, it's a focus on the electric, thermal, and ground transportation sectors, being 100% renewable in the electric sector, trying to become 100% renewable in the thermal and the ground transportation sectors by 2030. It's not just a BED initiative, it's all departments of the city having a role to play. We know, for example, DPW with its work on the fleet for the city, walking and biking, planning and being a part of that as well. Permitting and inspections with a variety of our building ordinances. BCA is a great partner. They're doing work to try to make the building just down the street a real example of a net zero approach for building. The library with education, so many partnerships throughout the city on this, and a variety of departments that are moving towards EVs in their fleet. And then the data itself comes from Synapse Energy Economics, and they draw from BED, Vermont Gas Systems, the Department of Motor Vehicles in Vermont, and then Vermont and Chittenden County travel data, some of which is provided through the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission as well. So the good news, the relatively good news here is in the ground transportation sector, where for the 3rd year in a row, we continue to be ahead of the pace, the very ambitious pace of the Net Zero 2030 roadmap. You can see we had a big drop off in emissions in 2020, obviously with the pandemic. But the news here is we've been able to hold that decline essentially more or less steady. And the reasons are we are continuing to see reduced vehicle miles traveled. We're seeing more EV adoption, certainly. And we're seeing less vehicles registered overall in the city of Burlington. So I talked about car share yesterday. We know car share plays a role in that. We know having free transit right now is helping with that. The bus, the GMT system being free. So we're seeing less vehicles, more EVs, and less miles traveled equals the result that you have here. I should mention that in terms of the data, we're always a 1 year, Bob mentioned lag. We have a 1 year lag here with what is Chittenden County and what is Vermont travel data. So Synapse for 22 has the Vermont travel data extrapolated for Burlington. In 21 and prior years, they're able to use the Chittenden County data. And next year, will have the 23 Vermont data and the 22 Chittenden County. So it's always subject to a 1-year lag revision, but this is the data as we have it right now. So this is a positive. On a less positive note, we're seeing some rebound in building sector natural gas use. And this is not weather normalized, so some of this can be weather variance. And I'll break it down here into residential and commercial. You can see both sectors are still down from the 2018 baseline that we began with for the roadmap. Residential sort of came down and has more or less flatlined. It's not really going back up in a steep way. Commercial came down, but is having a little bit more of a pronounced rebound, as you can see here. And in addition to the potential weather variance, it's possible we have units coming online that were permitted before we had the renewable heating ordinance, for example. We also know that it's possible that buildings are using their ventilation systems differently post-pandemic, and so that may be a driver as well. I'll talk about some of the potential solutions to that challenge in a moment. But this is the overall, combining the thermal and ground transportation sector, 2019 through 2022. You can see that we had that big drop off and we've mostly held on to it. We're essentially up 3.2% between 2020 and 2022. The US is more than double that in terms of rebound between 2020 and 22. So we're doing a better job overall than the nation as a whole in terms of holding on to some of those gains that we saw in the pandemic in terms of a reduction in emissions. We are 11.2% lower today than we were in 2018 based on this data. So we're not yet kind of bending back towards the net zero curve, but we are holding on to some significant gains in terms of lowering our emissions. So I think I just actually covered this slide just with what I just said. So I'll jump to the next one, which is also something that we've kind of touched on, I think more or less. I note again, we are not yet on pace with electrification to the levels that we need to be in terms of EVs and heat pumps. The reduced vehicles and reduced VMT is masking the EV number for the moment. We'll need the EV number to grow in order to maintain and build on that progress. In terms of, where do we go from here? What are we focusing on? In the building sector, the rental weatherization policy that was passed but has only just really begun to be, implemented, and the renewable heating ordinance for new construction, those will begin to have some impact in the coming years, an even bigger impact potentially from the carbon pricing and policy that could come into effect in 2024, which would essentially ensure that new construction is being built renewable, clean, or paying a carbon fee, and that large existing buildings and city buildings, as they replace heating systems and water heating systems, are coming into compliance with that goal as well. So that could have a really transformative impact in terms of the building sector. The other piece that would have a transformative impact in commercial sector natural gas use is district heat, 16% reduction right off the bat with district heat. And then obviously the incentives from the federal legislation should give us a little bit of a tailwind combined with the Vermont rebates and the Burlington electric incentives in terms of helping us get more adoption for EVs and heat pumps. So there's some reasons for optimism with that. We have work to do. The two most important things in my mind in 2023 are, can we get district energy approved, and can we implement the carbon fee policy? If we do those two things, we'll have made a significant impact on future updates of the net zero roadmap. May not show up right in 2023's update, but by 24 and beyond, we'll start to see that impact having a material benefit for us. So that's the slides. I went through them a little quickly. We are going to run through them again on Tuesday evening at City Council. And this presentation as well is posted on our website, burlingtonelectric.com/NZE for net zero energy, so that it's available for the public as well.
Questions?
Is there a more detailed report that's accessible?
There's nothing more detailed. What we get essentially, and it's probably the best deal around because we don't have to pay a significant amount after making the initial roadmap investment. We have a model from Synapse that basically is an Excel sheet that we're able to update each year. And so they build the kind of charts here off of that Excel sheet. So there's no other written product because we are trying to keep, the costs of doing the update low. But this is the data that I think is kind of the pertinent data. We also obviously track for the commission our own incentive uptake as heat pumps and EVs. So sometimes we'll try to do a net zero update that focuses on some of those pieces as well. For this one, we really focused on the top line data. Were there any questions though that you had, Commissioner, that we could provide more detail
Well,
on?
specifically, when you say so much automobile fuel is used in Burlington.
Yes.
Where does it come from and what was it? You already talked about that a bit. That's probably the tough one. The gas, you just talked to BGS. Yes.
The gas is the easier one because you can get that direct from VGS for Burlington. The gasoline and diesel is really a function of looking at the vehicles registered, types of vehicles, vehicle mile travel estimates that they have for the Burlington area, and number of EVs. So it's not a literal, this is how many gallons were sold in Burlington. It's really meant to be for our customers, regardless where they're traveling, whether it's in the city or outside the city. We don't track travel in Burlington, which was one way of cutting this, or consumption of fuel in Burlington, literally.
That would be tough.
That would be hard. And we really feel like we can impact our customers' travel, whether it's in or outside of Burlington. So we track the residential, commercial, bus fleet, vehicle miles traveled, what type of vehicle, how many vehicles registered, and then they extrapolate the data from that.
But BED actually gathers that info and inputs it to the spreadsheet?
We help Synapse, but Synapse creates the spreadsheet. We help gather the data where we can or make contact with the Vermont DMV, for example, so that they can get the data from the DMV.
Okay, and I presume Synapse's stuff is private.
Sorry?
It's not available to somebody like me, right?
Oh, if you were interested in the kind of the underlying spreadsheet where I pull these graphs from, we could share that.
All right, well, that's
But
where I am.
their model itself is proprietary, I believe.
Okay, this is a side question. Has there been any work comparing how much electricity people use when they go to a heat pump versus how much gas they used previously?
There has been some characterization of that at the Department of Public Service. And I know our energy services team is working on that because it really is an underlying calculation for our incentives. And I think particularly in the centrally ducted heat pump space, there's been some challenge around some of the assumptions, somewhat in the mini split space as well, but particularly the centrally ducted because those have a set point, typically a switch over between 30 and 40 degrees external. So you're not necessarily going to get the entirety of your fossil fuel use out by switching to a centrally ducted. You can reduce it. It's very much a hybrid system. The mini splits have the potential in a well-weatherized building to be 100% source. In fact, I was in a building earlier today in Burlington, a new multi-unit apartment building that is 100% heat pump mini split for the heating with really significant weatherization insulation. So we know that can be up to 100%, but we're doing work along with the department to sort of characterize what the averages are relative to you put in a heat pump, how much fossil fuel use can you assume you've reduced, and updating that. Chris Burns could provide more detail if you're interested.
Okay, thanks.
And there's potentially growing opportunity with centrally ducted cold climate opportunity when they're moving away from hybrid to the more like all-in-one electric opportunity.
Yeah.
Which is coming and coming quickly, which is great, but still a challenge when on the coldest days. But I think the cold climate opportunities in terms of specifications are
That could be a big opportunity
Yeah.
for our climate and for customers who have ductwork. Yeah, absolutely.
Other questions? Any?
All I've got.
Okay. We'll move on to item number 8 on our agenda this evening, which is the IRP update with Mr. Gibbons.
It's with us remotely.
Who is?
I was saying you're with us remotely.
Apparently you can hear me, so I am. Well, good evening, everyone. My qualitative update is that the T&D chapter is nearing completion, and we intend to provide that to the Department of Public Service. We're not sure which the generation chapter is target completion date is next Wednesday. So those may be going over to the department very close to each other. We're not going to hold anything. We're going to release it to the department. as it's ready in draft form so that they have as much time as they can to review it. As Darren mentioned, the carbon report for McNeil is now been released as of yesterday, and we will be providing that to the department. The economic report that goes along with it, I'll use the term, is nigh done. I'm just making sure that a couple of terms like expense and expenditure have been correctly reflected in it, and that should be done tomorrow. And the last note is that we, thanks to Emily, a contact that Emily received, we have, and Emily can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's a postmaster's or even a PhD student who is going to join us. Emily, if you can correct that for me.
PhD student,
who will be joining us in a week and a half or so, who is going to work with me on the net zero chapter, where we're going to have a bunch of different analysis that don't fit well into the other chapters, but advance the general mission of BED. There is an update I will be providing subsequent to this meeting, but I want to be careful not to say specifics about it tonight, just because there's a timing of an announcement. It's not a huge deal, but I think it may be helpful to the IRP, and as soon as we announce that tomorrow night, I'll be happy to share that information as well with the Electric Commission. With those notes, and I'm not trying to be terribly cryptic, I apologize, but it's just something that happened today, and it'll be announced tomorrow, and I just don't want to precede the announcement. I'm available to talk over the BED Integrated Resource Plan. I do note that it's kind of getting a little late, so I leave it up to Darren and the Commission as to whether they want to go through the forecast PowerPoint at this point, or whether you would rather punt that again to next meeting.
I'm okay with it.
Next meeting's better.
Either way works.
Okay, sounds like the general.
I will have more time to get ready for it. We've been straight out this week if it's next week, but I can't, next meeting, but I can do it tonight if it's desired.
It would also be inclusive of information that
withholding at the moment, so.
Well, that will be provided in advance of that and has nothing to do with the forecast directly. So.
Okay. Sounds like we can.
Does it hurt to wait till the next meeting, or is it?
Good on
I can't think of any personal reason.
Sounds like the consensus is to wait till the next meeting and to give you a little bit more time to go a little deeper into that.
But James,
Again, like I say, Tom was the lead on it, and I'm going to be presenting for him. So I would love to have a little more time, but again, I can do it tonight if need be.
sounds like no, James. So James, what documents will be available between now and the next meeting online?
My anticipation would be the T&D chapter draft, the generations chapter draft, the carbon report, which is available but will be provided as an IRP component shortly, and the economics report on McNeil.
Okay.
And then the mystery announcement.
We'll be notified that they're out there.
I would provide them to you directly, would be my plan. Because at this point, they're not going to be put on the website as drafts.
Sorry, I meant on our personal accounts. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So I guess we agree on that part. Or, do you have any more?
No, thank you. I'm done with the updates for this last month.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners? James's update. Yeah. No? Go ahead.
Is there a question, Commissioner Ernie?
No, it's for check-in.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, James. On to item number 9, Commissioners check-in. Last round of anything we want to bring up
Scott,
after all this?
I was thinking of sending a note to the folks who were here today about lighting, sort of making the reference to the things I talked about, and also semi-seriously saying, hey, young man or young woman, I'm going to choke into this. Question is that cool? It's be as a person, not as a representative of the department, but let me know.
I have no problem with it. Steve? I think you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get addresses from you.
Anything else? Hearing nothing on commissioners' check-in, than that, I will entertain a motion. Motion made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion on the motion? I always like that one. None. all, yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. All in favor of,
Getting late.
Who's up
yes,
with
right.
that? Are you down with that?
All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next month.
Thank you.
Question, did I handle that right
Oh,
with
yeah,
those
yeah.
people, or did I?
I think we're just coming to it too
I
late.
was feeling like I was going a little rogue.
That was good. I have no precedent. Like I'm still new to me.